The galaxy had long whispered about humanity, a species tucked away on a pale blue planet, dismissed by the sprawling alliances of advanced civilizations as harmless, inconsequential, and primitive. Yet beneath their modest cities and chaotic politics lay a resilience that no alien mind could fathom, and it was precisely this quiet, unassuming power that would soon redefine the meaning of fear as the first reports reached the Council of Elders that the Trelkin Dominion, a merciless species, obsessed with expansion, had begun their incursions into the border systems of the neighboring Varan coalition, and though the Varans sent urgent pleas for aid, the major powers of the galaxy continued to ignore them, confident that humanity would remain a neutral observer, content with their fragile planet and limited reach. But the humans, led by Admiral Elena Morales and her diverse council of military strategists, scientists, and diplomats, had been watching, listening, calculating, and they knew the Trelkin would not stop at the Varan worlds, and so when the first Trelkin frigate slipped past orbital defenses of Varan Prime, they encountered a fleet of human warships that seemed to materialize from nowhere, each vessel equipped with experimental energy shields, adaptive weaponry, and coordinated AI-driven tactics that no alien fleet had ever faced, and the Trelkin commanders, cocky from centuries of domination, assumed this was a token show of force, a minor inconvenience. But humanity had calculated their every move, exploiting weaknesses in formation, atmospheric entry points, and communication protocols, and within hours, entire squadrons of Trelkin cruisers were disabled, disarmed, or captured, leaving the Dominion in stunned disbelief. And as word spread, other civilizations watching this unexpected intervention began to realize that humans were not only capable of defending others, but had mastered strategies that turned superior forces into trapped, quivering targets, and the humans themselves, rather than reveling in conquest, focused on evacuating the Varan civilians, providing medical aid, and restoring infrastructure with precision and speed that left the galaxy questioning their previous assumptions about human priorities. And the Trelkin, humiliated and enraged, attempted to regroup, unleashing shockwave weapons and orbital bombardments, only to find that human engineers had anticipated such retaliation, deploying countermeasures that neutralized attacks while minimizing collateral damage, demonstrating a level of tactical foresight and moral calculation that confused the aliens further. And as Admiral Morales communicated directly with the Trelkin High Council, explaining that humanity would defend any civilization under threat, the message carried a quiet, lethal clarity: underestimate us at your own peril. Because humans do not strike blindly, they protect relentlessly, and the aliens, for the first time in centuries, felt a fear that was not born of immediate destruction, but from understanding that a species capable of such careful, uncompromising defense could, and would, outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast them if pushed too far. And across the stars, whispers of humanity's intervention grew into legends, inspiring some species to seek alliance, deterring others from aggression, and marking the beginning of a new era in galactic politics where the true meaning of fear was no longer the power to destroy but the certainty that humans would defend the weak with precision, patience, and unrelenting resolve, rewriting the rules of engagement, shifting the balance of power, and proving that even in a universe dominated by ancient, technologically advanced civilizations, there existed a force that demanded respect, and it was a quiet, unstoppable force of humanity protecting those who could not defend themselves. The Trelkin Dominion, reeling from their first encounter with human forces, retreated to their core systems, sending urgent reports to the High Tribunal of the Conclave, a council of ancient civilizations that had long considered humans a minor footnote in the galactic ledger. Yet even among these elders there were whispers of unease as detailed intelligence from scouts and signal intercepts described human fleets appearing faster than their warp signatures should allow, deploying energy grids that could shield entire cities, and coordinating defenses with an almost instinctive synchronization that suggested humans had evolved not merely to survive but to anticipate threats in ways no alien species had. And while the Conclave debated the significance of these reports, humanity had already begun preparations for the inevitable next encounter, leveraging advanced cloaking arrays, quantum communication networks, and rapid deployment strike craft, while simultaneously sending emissaries to nearby systems under threat, warning that humans would protect any sentient species facing annihilation. And in the Varan sectors, the aftermath of human intervention became a blueprint for coordinated recovery. As engineers rebuilt orbital stations, medics treated survivors of Trelkin bombardments, and scientists offered technologies that stabilized planetary climates disrupted by the conflict, all while Admiral Morales and her team observed from the flagship Prometheus, noting that the Trelkin were adapting, analyzing, yet failing to anticipate the patience and precision inherent in human strategy. And when the Dominion attempted a covert infiltration of supply routes, they were intercepted by human intelligence units that had already predicted the timing, trajectory, and methods of attack, disabling the infiltrators with minimal force while leaving their ships intact for examination, sending a clear signal that humanity's objective was not revenge but protection. And this principle confounded the Trelkin further, undermining their morale and sowing doubt among their own commanders. While across the conclave, discussions began to shift from casual dismissal of Earth to cautious acknowledgement that humans were neither reckless nor weak, but patient, adaptive, and willing to enforce a protective ethos at galaxy-altering scale. And as more worlds received direct human assistance, the legend of their intervention spread, creating a ripple of hope among vulnerable civilizations, while simultaneously forcing ambitious empires to reconsider the cost of aggression. And in private strategic councils, human officers debated the extent to which restraint should be maintained, recognizing that while their forces could decimate hostile fleets, their true power lay in demonstrating that humans could choose to protect rather than destroy, creating a paradigm shift in which fear was no longer tied solely to overwhelming firepower but to the certainty that those who would harm the innocent would face consequences calculated with precision, patience, and unyielding determination. And as the Trelkin prepared for another engagement, Admiral Morales calmly instructed her fleet to continue rescue operations, to refine predictive algorithms for enemy movements, and to expand diplomatic outreach. Because humans understood that true dominance came not from terror alone, but from earning the respect and trust of those they defended, and that philosophy, enforced with unerring skill, will become the cornerstone of humanity's rise across the stars, leaving aliens to grapple with the fact that the species they once dismissed had redefined the very rules of galactic power through the simple, devastating principle of protecting the weak. As the Trelkin Dominion struggled to regroup, reports of human activity spread through the galaxy like wildfire, igniting both awe and fear among species that had previously assumed themselves untouchable, and in the star systems bordering the fractured Krelmai expanse, small, defenseless colonies watched in astonishment as human task forces arrived seemingly from nowhere, deploying defensive drones, stabilizing failing habitats, and neutralizing orbital hazards with precision that suggested not only mastery of technology but an unparalleled understanding of strategy. And while alien commanders panicked over humanity's rapid response capabilities, Admiral Elena Morales convened a council aboard the Prometheus, outlining a daring plan to extend protective reach further into the expanse, knowing that the Trelkin would inevitably strike again, and that the key to preserving the balance of power lay not in mere retaliation, but in demonstrating that humans would not allow the weak to suffer under alien aggression. And as reconnaissance revealed, the Trelkin were attempting to corral vulnerable populations into resource-rich worlds for exploitation, Morales ordered a multi-pronged deployment of human fleets, each equipped with adaptive cloaking, kinetic dampening fields, and advanced rescue craft capable of evacuating thousands of civilians per sortie. And while one fleet engaged in direct defensive maneuvers, another covertly disabled supply chains and communications hubs, leaving Trelkin forces frustrated and increasingly desperate. And the aliens began to recognize a pattern they could not break. Every human maneuver was calculated, precise, and overwhelmingly effective without resorting to wanton destruction. And across the conclave, debates erupted over how a species so seemingly ordinary could consistently outthink the galaxy's most advanced militaries, with some arguing that humans must possess ancient knowledge lost to the stars, while others feared that their technology and coordination were the result of evolution, strategy, and morality fused into a terrifyingly effective combination. And as Morales and her team coordinated simultaneous rescue, counterstrike, and diplomatic missions, the Trelkin tried one last gambit, deploying a superweapon designed to annihilate entire planetary defenses in a single strike, only to find that humans had anticipated such escalation, redirecting energy grids, creating temporal decoupling fields, and evacuating civilians with near-perfect efficiency, turning the weapon's own destructive energy into a shield for those they protected. And in the aftermath, alien leaders convened emergency meetings, realizing that humanity's power was not defined merely by technology or firepower, but by an unshakable commitment to protect the innocent, a principle so deeply ingrained that even under threat, Humans would choose defense over aggression, yet execute it with lethal effectiveness, and as a Trelkin fleet limped back to their core systems, demoralized and defeated, the message reverberated across the stars. Humans protect the weak, and in doing so, they have become a force whose reach, strategy, and resolve no civilization can ignore. And even those who had once laughed at Earth now calculated with careful reverence that provoking humanity came with consequences beyond imagination, consequences that would redefine fear, power, and the very meaning of justice across the galaxy. Following their humiliating defeat, the Trelkin Dominion retreated to their home systems to regroup, but the shockwaves of human intervention had already rippled through every major faction of the galaxy, and species that had long ignored humanity now watched with a mixture of curiosity, fear, and grudging respect as humans expanded their protective operations, sending fleets to stabilize systems threatened by piracy, environmental collapse, or aggressive neighbors, and Admiral Elena Morales, coordinating from the Prometheus, insisted that each mission balanced tactical precision with humanitarian aid, because humanity's message was not conquest but protection, and this philosophy left alien observers scrambling to comprehend a species that could wield power with such lethal efficiency yet remain morally disciplined. And as humans continued to defend the weak, other civilizations began seeking alliances, sharing intelligence, and even transferring technology under strict guidance. Eager to align with a species whose fleet seemed omnipresent, their strategies flawless, and their commitment unwavering, and the Trelkin, desperate to reclaim lost prestige, attempted infiltration and sabotage across human-assisted territories, only to find that predictive AI, rapid deployment teams, and human intuition anticipated each maneuver, neutralizing threats before they could escalate while preserving civilian life. And this combination of foresight and restraint terrified alien commanders, who began to understand that the real power of humanity was not measured by the number of ships in orbit or the destructive capacity of their weapons, but by a calculated, unwavering will to defend those who could not defend themselves. And in private council chambers, Morales' team debated how far to extend their influence without tipping into domination, aware that humanity's reputation of protectors was now as potent a force as any fleet, and as Trelkin spies returned with reports of human tactics, alien intelligence networks scrambled to analyze the pattern, only to discover that every action was designed to maximize protection while minimizing destruction, leaving the Trelkin demoralized and questioning whether any future aggression would be feasible. And across the galaxy, the whispers of human intervention grew into a legend. Humans did not merely win battles. They reshaped the expectations of civilizations, proving that restraint, strategic genius, and an unbreakable moral compass could make even the most powerful empires hesitate, and by protecting the weak, humanity was not only rewriting the rules of engagement, but establishing an entirely new paradigm where fear was no longer rooted in annihilation, but in knowing that any species foolish enough to threaten the vulnerable would face consequences meticulously delivered by a patient, unyielding, and unstoppable human force. The Trelkin Dominion, now fractured and demoralized, attempted desperate measures, sending shadow fleets and covert operatives to infiltrate human-protected systems. But every incursion was met with uncanny precision as Admiral Elena Morales' intelligence network, a combination of human intuition, advanced AI, and decades of accumulated strategy, anticipated every maneuver, disabling enemy ships, rerouting supplies, and rescuing civilians before the aliens even realized an operation was underway. And the Trelkin began to understand the terrifying pattern. Humans did not fight recklessly, they did not attack without purpose, and yet their action consistently produced decisive results, a realization that rippled across every faction observing the conflict, leaving even seasoned commanders unsettled by the species they had once dismissed. And while Morales coordinated rescue operations, fleet maneuvers, and interstellar diplomacy, humans continued to demonstrate a capacity for multi-tiered strategy that no alien civilization had anticipated, simultaneously evacuating endangered colonies, neutralizing Trelkin offensive positions, and establishing communications channels for long-term defense without ever overextending themselves. And across the galaxy, whispers turned into urgent transmissions as civilizations realized that humanity's commitment to protect the weak was absolute, that every calculation, every deployment, and every technological advancement had been honed not for conquest, but for a relentless, methodical defense of the innocent. And the Trelkin, increasingly desperate, unleashed experimental weapons designed to cripple human operations, only to find that predictive modeling, rapid repair protocols, and tactical ingenuity neutralized each strike with minimal disruption, leaving the aliens baffled, frustrated, and terrified by the efficiency and morality intertwined in human warfare. And as the conclave convened emergency meetings, long-held assumptions about strategy, morality, and power were overturned as analysts debated how a species so ordinary could consistently outperform fleets with superior numbers, firepower, and centuries of combat experience. And Admiral Morales, aware of the growing legend humans were creating, maintained strict discipline over her forces, emphasizing that restraint, precision, and a commitment to protect the weak were the true measures of strength. And as the Trelkin retreated once more, demoralized and broken, the galaxy at large began to recalibrate its understanding of fear, power, and morality, realizing that humans had introduced an entirely new paradigm where the protection of the defenseless was both a moral imperative and a strategic weapon, a combination so formidable that any civilization contemplating aggression would now pause, reconsider, and recognize that humanity's true power was not the ships in orbit or the weapons they wielded, but the unwavering, calculated, and unstoppable determination to defend the weak, a lesson that would echo across the stars for generations to come. The Trelkin Dominion, shaken and humiliated by repeated failures, began to fray internally as their commanders argued over strategy, unable to comprehend how humans consistently outmaneuvered them without unnecessary destruction, and while their fleets dwindled and morale plummeted, humanity's influence spread quietly but decisively across the border systems. As Admiral Elena Morales oversaw the fortification of threatened worlds, the evacuation of endangered populations, and the seamless integration of new allies into defensive networks, each action reinforcing the growing reputation that humans protected the weak with relentless precision. And as humans extended their operations to the Outer Rim colonies, they encountered other species that had long suffered under Trelkin dominance of predatory neighbors, and the human approach remained consistent: assess, predict, and intervene with maximum effectiveness while minimizing harm, deploying advanced shields, adaptive defenses, and rapid response units that rendered conventional attacks futile. And as the aliens attempted increasingly sophisticated assaults, they discovered that humans had anticipated not only their movements but their thought processes, strategies, and cultural tendencies, turning every Trelkin offensive into a calculated trap. And across the galaxy, the legend of human intervention inspired awe and trepidation as diplomats, scientists, and military leaders began to acknowledge that humans had achieved a level of strategic and moral dominance rarely seen in interstellar history, and even those who had once dismissed Earth now sought treaties, alliances, and guidance from humanity, eager to learn how to emulate a species that could combine foresight, technological mastery, and unyielding ethical commitment into an unstoppable force. And the Trelkin, desperate to regain lost honor, attempted a final gambit, assembling a massive armada to strike human-protected sectors, only to find that humans had already neutralized critical supply lines, rerouted civilians, and established counteroffensive positions, leaving the alien fleet trapped in a web of their own design. And as Morales' forces systematically disabled key vessels while evacuating the innocent, the Trelkin realized in stark horror that humanity's power was not measured by aggression but by the unshakable principle that they would protect the weak at any cost. A realization that shattered the Dominion's command, disrupted their culture of fear, and sent ripples of caution and respect throughout the galaxy, as it became clear that humans had fundamentally redefined what it meant to wield power, turning moral conviction into tactical supremacy, and proving to every civilization that to threaten the defenseless was not merely unwise, it was a guarantee of inevitable defeat at the hands of a species whose patience, intelligence, and resolve were absolute and unstoppable. The remnants of the Trelkin Dominion, shattered, demoralized, and humbled, retreated to the outer fringes of a territory, their once feared fleet scattered and their commanders forever wary, while across the galaxy, human influence continued to grow not through conquest, but through unwavering protection of those who could not defend themselves. And Admiral Elena Morales, having orchestrated countless operations that combined precision, foresight, and ethical restraint, reflected on the transformation unfolding among alien civilizations, as once arrogant empires now approach humanity with cautious respect, seeking treaties, guidance, and understanding, and even those who had previously dismissed Earth began to acknowledge that the defining characteristic of humanity was neither firepower nor numbers, but a relentless, calculated commitment to defend the innocent. And as humans rebuilt devastated colonies, restored communications, and shared technologies to stabilize threatened worlds, the galaxy began to recognize a new paradigm of power, one where moral courage, strategic brilliance, and protective action intertwined to create a force that no civilization could ignore or outmatch. And as Morales convened her council to plan the next phase of outreach, she emphasized that humanity's true legacy would not be domination, but the example set by defending the weak with unwavering skill and compassion. And across distant systems, children grew up hearing stories of humans appearing from the stars to shield the helpless. Scientists studied the predictive algorithms that had turned fleets into guardians rather than invaders, and diplomats referenced human campaigns as model for ethical engagement in interstellar politics, while the Trelkin, scarred by their encounters, lived with profound lesson etched into their culture and history, that to threaten the defenseless was to awaken a force of precision, patience, and unrelenting resolve, and that the species they had mocked and underestimated had redefined fear not as the ability to destroy, but as a certainty that humans would protect the vulnerable with absolute effectiveness, reshaping the balance of power, the rules of engagement, and the very moral fabric of the galaxy. And in the quiet aftermath of countless operations, Admiral Morales gazed at the stars, knowing that humanity's mission had succeeded, that their example would endure, and that the true meaning of fear had being revealed at every corner of the cosmos. Humans protect the weak, and those who oppose them will face consequences that are inevitable, precise, and unstoppable, leaving the galaxy forever changed by the quiet, unstoppable force of a species that chose compassion as its weapon and vigilance as its armor.